to Podcast This Escape, the podcast where we talk about the escape room that we escaped from in the previous episode of this podcast. Danny and I have just escaped the garden of Miss Hawthorne.
Well, with a slight asterisk, I escaped the garden.
Oh, I stayed in the garden forever. I disappeared out of existence.
Into oblivion.
But that was the room from C Scans. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was absolutely a dream to come on here.
Oh, thank you. All right, so let's talk about where did this room come from? Like, why a Victorian garden?
That is an amazing question. It might have been so long that I'm not entirely sure. I know I have a book recommendation for anyone out there. I am a big fan of this book series that I can't remember. The first book is called Etiquette and Espionage, and it follows a similar sort of theme in that it's sort of a Victorian style, but it's a little more leaning into like steampunk, and it's this young ladies' school where instead of being taught witchcraft secretly, they are taught to be spies and assassins along with good housewives.
I am definitely into that.
Fair.
Mm-hmm. They all have fantastic names. It's all Etiquette and Espionage, Waistcoats and Weaponry, Manners and Mutiny is one of my favorites in there. I don't think I've even read all of them, but they're delicious. They're fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds right up my alley. I'm not usually a Victorian era person in that sort of while, but for some reason, stories about slightly peculiar girls' training schools, it's such a specific thing that does get me.
That's why you like Madeline so much?
It's a good one.
So that was your kind of Victorian setting. Is there a reason you decided to embrace like the witchcraft aspect of it?
I think I just find it really cool. I think one of the first puzzles that I came up with was using the blue moon, and I just loved the idea of this blue moon, either because of a blue moon in the sky. At first it was going to be like you have to wait till midnight on a full moon to read the book, but just the idea of reading this book in the moonlight with these like glowing words on the pages was really exciting for me, and I couldn't help thinking about how cool that would be in a real escape room if you had something that turned the lights in there into like a black light so that you could see as if it was that kind of thing. I think there are a few things in here that would be very fun to do that with.
And I've always we've had occasionally in real escape rooms, like people like using UV light is such a kind of classic thing, but the feeling of like the difference in feeling of how much cooler it is when the room itself produces or changes to have UV light rather than just giving you a torch and be like, go ahead, go for it.
Yeah, we've done a couple
wonderful
of rooms that have done that, and you're right, it has made a big difference, and it never leaves you with that, more UV
yeah,
feeling.
Instead it's got such a different feeling of like, ooh, stuff has changed, like
That's a
something's
good point.
happened. And so I like that. And this like the idea of having a room change to be like the moon has come out and it's a blue moon and is really fun.
There's a very interesting mix in this room, I feel, of things that could work great in a real escape room, and obviously things that not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like animating the statues and probably dealing with a cat. I've heard that there is a room somewhere. I don't know if it was in
I would not trust a room with a real cat.
in Japan, China. I feel like it was somewhere in that area where you needed to coax a cat to come towards you for something, and I cannot imagine that going well.
No,
You
I
can't
would
trust
hate
a
that.
cat to be obedient.
You can't trust a cat.
The
It's got its
statues
own
would
whims.
be rough because you could totally do the statues. You would just have to pay 7 actors to stand entirely still in gray makeup for hours.
Oh man. Yeah, that's true. Or how hilarious would be. They're actually just sort of in the wall. And at some point, when you don't notice, actors replace the statue hands
It's to stick their hands out.
through a wall.
Perfect.
That's ideal.
Could totally make that work. I would love to have seen the wetting the stones to make a message appear in a real room.
That's
I would
fun because you
love
could do
that.
that, right? Because that's like
I
hydrophobic
feel like
paint.
that would work.
Yeah,
For
right.
sure.
You would have each thing. You'd have a hydrophobic paint that just is something that water won't stick to. So when they get wet, they'll come up with a
Yeah.
message. I really liked that. That was a lot of fun. As soon as I saw that message, my first thought was like, it said, even the sharpest knife. And I was like, cryptic crossword clue. Let's look at every even letter that spells out H-H-R-E. Nope, that's nothing. And then someone needs a whetstone. We had that whetstone. Now, like, that was an interesting moment because I would feel that, like, finding the stone in the fountain and seeing that it is wet and has a code on it would be an indication that you should get the other rocks wet to get the code. And then we also have the clue of, hey, do you need a whetstone?
Wonder if we need if it would, how much would people still get it if the stone weren't there,
or if it was just the stone? Like,
I like the
was
message.
that anything that changed when you were putting it together?
I like whetstone as a reference in there, so I would never want to lose that.
I like whetstone for whetstone.
But do you think people would be able to solve it if there weren't a stone in the fountain?
It's I don't know. It's interesting. Is that something that's changed at all, or did you always have both things present?
I kind of went back and forth as to which clue I was using. The reason that I kept the stone in the fountain and the piece of advice is that the piece of advice was something that people really struggled with sometimes, especially because they didn't connect whetstone to wet stone all the time. Sometimes they were like, we need a knife. I love my friends.
We like a good pun, so
yeah.
I think that would have worked for us.
Yeah,
but it is hard to say.
The other thing is the advice on there I wouldn't have dared take off because I had advice from someone I was having to give them a lot of clues to get the actual whenever racked with midnight qualms, meet the gods with open palms.
Sure.
And they suggested having more pieces of advice scattered around, especially if it could be in the form of like rhyming advice or a saying or something like that. Would clue people into that.
I did
feel
that is
true. I
a
think that
lot
does
more
help.
comfortable having them in multiple occasions.
Like we had a moment during that one where you said, "Oh, it's gonna rhyme. It's gonna be like a spell or like a saying or something. It's going to rhyme."
Yeah.
That helps a huge amount.
Yeah, having that sort of level of familiarity for it, definitely worthwhile. So yeah, I agree with that. I liked having that there. So yeah, it's just a matter of could you get rid of the stone, but it is entirely possible that on its own, just seeing whetstone like that, maybe our brains wouldn't have gone there.
Could you have no stone and also no H and literally have it say whetstone? And
that's too much because you'd have to make a point of that unless you've got an image.
Well, yeah, you could do it as an image, have it written down and show them what's written there on the plaque.
That's a gamble, I reckon. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of different ways you could play it because it's
all like sorts of what ifs.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, between originally designing it, playtesting it, and now, any other changes or anything that's happened over time?
I think the biggest change was the flower puzzle, which is now a little bit funkier than it was originally intended to be. It was originally... I spent so long researching this. I was trying to find flowers where basically if you put them in like a logic puzzle grid, there could be a different color of each flower, and through the actual like garden and biology type information of what flowers can be what colors, it would become obvious which was which. And that was an incredible amount of work that was fully wasted because I realized, like, I will have to give them a literal reference page and it will fully stop being fun. So I was really inspired by, I think, the bakery room where other senses were really important. And I thought if we have sticky catchfly and the thorn apple, that would be something where basically people just have to think outside the box and ask, like, do any of them have, like, thorny apples?
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, notoriously, that bakery room using other senses was really difficult to figure out. Just wasn't a thing to think of. And yeah, that was exactly it. We just went as a general look. And I think it was exactly... I was exactly expecting what you said you started with. I was... maybe a logic puzzle grid or just some detailed information. There's also the fact that plants are just super not my thing. So when it comes to researched plant information, I drop out a little bit. I just go, oh my god, I'm going to have to trust someone else on this. So yeah, the idea of looking for trick ways around it didn't occur to me at all.
Yeah,
It's interesting because, like, my first instinct was like, oh, do we as characters know enough to distinguish these plants? And I was like, well, no, you can't just know which plant is. So then I thought, well, like I can tell, like I could look at ivy and say that's ivy because it would look like ivy. But
How
it feels like
stupid is this?
But it feels like that's then not what to do, because otherwise it's just, can I as a person, like, what do I know? Like, I know what heather looks like. I know what rosemary smells like. I know what snapdragons look like.
No,
like
true.
so I should be able to tell them, but I can't. So I should wait for my character to get the knowledge of how to do this.
And then
so
once
I
we had
as well
a
was
book,
expecting a later puzzle.
even if we couldn't use it tremendously, having a book there is enough confirmation that perhaps we can start doing this.
But I think I found it hard as well,
yeah.
because when we got the book, I was expecting it to have like a section on
It
flowers.
was tricky to know. Maybe inside the book we needed another rhyme just saying, "Come on, experiment a little."
Because yeah, I didn't want to experiment because I would have just been using my own knowledge of stuff. Like, because some of them were like,
but then
were puns.
this was
like one of them was that like it was sticky catchfly. So it was like, cool, it's sticky. That's a fun little pun. But then ivy,
is it a pun, or is that just
well, it's
what
just
it
probably
actually
what
is?
it actually is.
So yeah, maybe we should have been doing exactly. Maybe we weren't being 10-year-old enough. A 10-year-old would absolutely say, "Oh, this one says sticky. Is there sticky?" So maybe we weren't. Maybe we felt like we were getting into it the right amount by not knowing stuff, but we weren't doing it enough by not experimenting. That's a funny line to draw. Yeah. That's a curious one.
Because then ivy, we could figure out was ivy because it was clearly ivy. Like the answer to that was like that one's clearly ivy.
True,
like I know what ivy is compared to begonia. Ivy's a climbing plant, begonia's not. So I wonder if there'd be like, I feel like, to me, if there'd been almost like a page of plants where you could see like there are lots of plants, but with like a really quick sort of,
so some sort of halfway
and
point,
almost do like a half cent, like just so the idea of like ivy is a climbing plant, begonias are like,
true. I reckon surely if we didn't know anything about ivy, I assume you'd have given us that in book form, right? Just to let us know at least. Cool, ivy is a climbing plant and it looks a little different.
Yeah. Something like that.
If we were fully clueless. That's an easy enough thing to put in.
One of the
needed.
reasons that things are so based on sort of pun type of things in parts of this is that I don't want people to come into it without knowledge of things and be punished for that.
Sure. Yeah, and yeah, typically we love that and work well with that. Okay, the whetstone thing, saw that right away. And great, yes, I love a good wordy pun rune. It just, for some reason, when it came to flowers, didn't spot it, didn't take for a long while, and I don't know why that is.
Although
it's
you
ridiculous.
wouldn't have needed to figure it out until around when you did anyway.
That's true, yeah. That's true. I suppose we could have experimented a lot more, like, well, before we got the book, and at least worked out some of them. But, so, yeah, we could have gotten at least things like the catch fly and the snapdragon, that sort of thing. We could have gotten that far, but yeah, we wouldn't have known what to do with that information, so it wouldn't have mattered much. But yeah, so we could tell, definitely, like you said at the start of the last episode, the whole wordy sort of thing, codes and that sort of thing, that's what you like. There were a lot of letter-based puzzles and mixing and matching, that sort of thing.
That puzzle of what was on the stones, was that the stone?
Yeah. I had a great time.
Absolutely loved doing that puzzle. Now, what's interesting is that's the same puzzle effectively as the one that's on the God's Palms, right? Like God's Palms is a series. So
it's very similar.
I love doing that puzzle. It was fun to revisit it again. Was there a reason you did the same structure of puzzle for those two sections?
Sort of. The honest truth is, originally there wasn't a puzzle for the second part. It was you have all the gods open their hands. You have all the gods open their hands, and you look around, and by spinning around the garden, you can see written out in front of you, Janice has the key. Which was a nice cinematic moment, but didn't really provide a last puzzle for people to like feel like, we got it going out on. And I thought that the changing of having the spaces between letters through like underscores to having hands apart was enough of a change that people would feel kind of like, oh, we figured out that this is the same thing, we understand the rules, and we've understood how they're tweaked.
Yeah,
but
true.
I also
Made sense.
am definitely not a master puzzle designer, and a lot of my playtesters aren't like super experienced with this sort of thing.
Sure. I quite liked, especially with the stone puzzle, the different variants in where the spaces works. I didn't notice that at first. You jumped on that right away. I noticed
love that
spaces, but I didn't
element of
tweak
it.
to the importance
That to me
of it.
was what was so
So
smart,
that was
good
a
about
big
that puzzle,
difference between those two.
Is this and the same as in the hands is the presence of the spaces.
Oh, it was the
to help you
trying to
structure your
make it a
answer
rhyme I
around
quite
it.
liked.
Yeah, I
was
really
my
liked having
part.
that space of being like, we know this has to end a word because it's followed by space. We know this has to start a word because it's preceded by space.
Yeah,
I
it's
found
interesting.
really, really
Adding more
fun.
rules to make it sort of easier, but obviously slightly trickier because there's more to it.
I think it was
an
done,
interesting
it was
combination.
Really,
it was
a
really good.
fun way of doing that. I
It's
absolutely
very
loved that puzzle.
Originally,
last
that
one,
one
because
actually... Sorry, the stone puzzle actually... It wasn't organized that way originally. I had just broken the words up individually. And so spaces weren't included at all. The thing about that was I was very worried that people would make more and more words that weren't correct. So the last place the last playtesters I had also mentioned the idea of a wraith. And they were very stuck on it. And I was like, your character has not heard of a wraith before. Does that help?
Yeah, but no, it's true because like as soon as you add the spaces, we get just enough. Like it's a tool for disambiguation. Like it's a tool to be like, you cannot put that here because it has to be the end of a word. So don't even worry about it. Like you can't connect these things. And like it's not even that it makes it like easier. It just makes it clearer. It makes it unambiguous.
Which is
it
great.
makes you come up with stuff like, oh, it could be wraith, and we never got caught on that because later on we realized that will never work. Like it can't fit together that way. Like it's not going to work because that's going to discount other words that like that'll leave us with two letters that don't have a beginning. And,
Yeah,
like,
that CK was going to go
so
nowhere.
it really made it like come together in a way that was satisfying.
Yeah.
Like there was no doubt in other than then we had to figure out exactly the cadence and the wording of the rhyme, but there was no doubt at the end that like this could be correct, but maybe it's something else, which is good. That's
Did you
a sign of a
have
good
any
puzzle.
question about whether the full stop was necessary? Because in the end, 100% I think it was.
Love the
But
full
yeah,
stop.
was that full stop ever there?
I
Ever not there?
originally didn't have capitalization or punctuation either, and so I wanted to make it as clear as possible that there were word breaks and that it was something that was like a full sentence that has a beginning and
I think that was,
an
it
end.
was really smart to
Yeah,
have that.
it was subtle and it worked.
It was also fantastic because people had a really rough time with qualms and palms a little bit. Like, once people got that, it was huge because they were like, okay, rhyming, we got this.
Yeah.
But
makes
it's
such a
very
difference.
easy to put things together incorrectly. Like, you can make quack in there. The original way I did it, my first playtesters did quack right away, and I was like, that needs to go
Oh my god.
right now.
Damn, I wish I'd thought of that. It was I'm actually a little relieved that accent-wise, qualms and palms are going to rhyme.
I looked
True.
it up
Because-
online. I googled it 4
yeah.
times. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. I have definitely had to fall into that before. It's been very scary.
Qualms and palms. Yeah, because that is a big thing of rhyming stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
Thank you also for getting that hand one as quickly as you did. Like, it was you who spotted that Janus was there. I was just stuck on, there's an EY and a TH. They.
yeah.
And that wasn't even part of it. I wasn't even though we're right at the end and we know we're right at the end, I wasn't trying to make the word key. I didn't consider it at all. I just went, all right, there's an AS and a K. Ask. They ask. He Janus. That's not right.
They ask you Janus. But no, like it's, and again we had that like had to start with K because of the spacing. I was like, oh, it's gonna be the start of a word. We had that same spacing. The spaced out E and K on the hands was like E space K, so you could
Yep.
build words around that the same way.
Makes
fun.
sense.
Yeah, it was good. I'm so sad that our cipher wheel is backwards. Thanks, Neil, for your backwards cipher wheel. Because, yeah, it was just a rotational
It's such a nice
cipher.
cipher wheel, and it totally screwed
And
us
if we
for this
didn't
one.
have this, we would have solved the puzzle
I
straight away.
know.
And instead it was like, wait a minute, we can do this in a fancy way. And instead it turns out, cipher wheels.
The
They're actually,
hubris.
unique in ciphering.
Yep.
And they're specific to their own situations. How
Ridiculous.
rude. But no, that worked out.
Well, I don't think I have too many more questions or comments to say, except for, the most important one of all. What happened to Mary Fernweather? Where is she?
If it's not too strange, I would love to do a flash forward in the story.
Please.
Flash forward to over a decade later. You are now a proud graduate of Miss Hawthorne's covert school for young witches in training, and you have come back to meet and talk with your former teacher and former guardian, catch up, and you finally get up the courage to tell her about this little midnight adventure that you had. And at the very end of your conversation, you ask, what did happen to Mary Fernweather? And Miss Hawthorne smiles at you, leans in and says, Mary Fernweather never existed. I needed some way for talented young girls like you, who are in bad positions, to have a little help. And I needed some way to scare those other girls into behaving.
Ah.
If only I had known this, but I've been dead for 9 years.
Does
That's all right. I
familiar
rename
die?
you in my memory as Mary Fernweather. Oh, I was fully expecting Mary Fernweather to be the cat secretly.
It turned into a cat as
Yep.
punishment.
That's fun. I like
That's
that.
how you make someone comply. You turn them into a cat, the most obedient of all animals.
No, I get too attached to my NPCs to do things like that. I'm really
That's
not good
fair.
at having villains.
Love it.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, I think all of my curiosity has been satisfied.
Yes, I loved it. I felt when I was drawing this room, I was getting a real Descent of the Culloden's Garden vibe, with like the one wall being
That's
the house.
funny.
And
I
having
felt very different about it.
Well, I mean, it was a very different room. In
There,
but
there was
that's-
no objects in common at all.
fountain. Wasn't there a kind of
I think there was a
broken fountain?
dead fountain,
Yeah.
maybe.
But no, look, it was a cool room. I really liked.
It was
loved
very
it.
atmospheric. I think this is one of my more atmospheric.
It was definitely a nice
illustrations.
atmospheric space. I could feel the space, like as in my head. Like I
True.
could really picture the space that we were in, which was great. Had that little moon dial, sundial. Like yeah, it was great. It was fun. I wish I'd drawn my statues a bit better because yeah, mine is just full of little kidney beans.
I didn't tell you what they were until later.
And that's why mine are so exciting.
Yes, your weird statues.
The saxophone and the rooster. Actually, the one that I called a shark before looks a little bit more like a jockey on a horse now.
You shouldn't be able to tell anybody what space is. That's just a blob. That's not a jockey on a horse or a shark.
This is art.
It's
Billy.
a blob. So thank
It's
you so
art.
much
It's
for
clouds
coming
in
on.
the sky.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on and running the room for us. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. So if people wanted to see more of stuff that you're doing, is there anywhere that you want to direct people who are listening to this episode?
I can be found on social media at cosmic_the_skin on most social media platforms, not Facebook though. And in addition to that, I have recently launched what has quickly become a sorely neglected blog, which is called my new and yet so sad blog is called Goose Sauce and Alphabet Soup. It's at goosesaucealphabetsoup.com. And if I have any other puzzles that I come up with, they will probably go up there, along with creative writing
Nice.
and just general sorts of creative things that I do up there. There's also fantastic photos of me by my lovely partner, who has a photography account on Instagram that everyone should please support.
Sweet.
Wonderful. Well, I'll have links to all of that in the show notes of this episode, so you should click on those and go through and check it all out. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. For people who are listening at home, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to help support us and the stuff that we do, you can sign up for our Patreon. There's lots of fun benefits there. Anybody who is a donor at any level can appear as an NPC in Danny's escape rooms that she designs, and I think also in Solve This Murder arcs in the
Yep, we're
future
gonna
as
be getting
character
to that.
names.
So yeah, thank you to Patreon user Sticky Catchfly.
Yes, of course. We also have bonus episodes for all of our $5 donors. They get all of the Solve This Murder episodes the moment they come out. They get the entire arc in one go as opposed to over a few weeks. They get our series of 2-minute mystery episodes where we solve the 2-minute mysteries put forward by Donald
So
Sobel. We also have bonus episodes for Escape This Podcast where we are looking back at our first season of Rooms and sort of doing
We're retrospecting and cleaning them up.
It's a podcast This Escape for episodes that existed before we had podcast
We're
This
whipping
Escape.
them into shape because, for the more recent episodes, when we go over episodes that I've written, we have to be nice to me because I'm frail. But now that those old episodes are 4 years old, I can be mean about them to myself.
There you go. It's good. You can hear Danny being mean to herself. And we have other benefits. There are badges for $10 donors and other fun things as well. So thank you, everybody who does support us on Patreon. It makes a huge difference. And yeah, if you want to help support the show and the network and what we're doing, you can go check that out. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Danny, for playing with me. And thank you, Cease, for bringing us a wonderful
Thank
room.
you so much.
Thank you so much. I will treasure this episode and not listen to it.
Wonderful. Bye, everybody.